Welcome back, everyone, to Seven Figure Copy. I'm so excited about what we have coming up this fall. So let's talk about it really quick. We're going to be looking at closely what actually helps premium buyers trust your offer before they ever get on a call with you, okay? Which means we're going to be talking about a couple things. We're going to talk about sales page copy. We're talking about buyer trust, buyer psychology, and authority positioning. I want you to leave with confidence, okay, that your offer feels different from everything else your buyer is already seeing online. Welcome to Seven Figure Copy, the podcast that helps you strengthen your brand messaging, website copy, and sales pages so they match the level your business is operating at now. I'm Gina Whitehouse, your expert conversion copywriter and messaging strategist. Here we explore a buyer's psychology, premium positioning, and the copy decisions that build trust before a prospect ever books a call, so your message attracts the right clients before you ever enter the conversation. So let's get started. At the level you're at in your business right now, you just can't risk explaining what you sell, just explaining what you sell, okay? It has to help the right buyer understand why it matters, why they should buy it now, and why you are the person that they should trust to help them. So today we're going to talk about something I see a lot on sales pages and offer pages, and this is the habit of listing what's included, like everything that's included, okay? Almost as if the buyer automatically understands why those things matter. So hear me. Yes, buyers need to know what is included in your offer, but listing what's included is not the same as helping someone actually want the offer. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Why listing what's included isn't enough to sell your offer alone. All right, as we get into this conversation today, I want you to think about this. I want you to think about a buyer doesn't usually make a decision because your list of deliverables is long, okay? She's making a decision when the page helps her understand why those deliverables matter to her. And this is where I see a lot of good offers get undersold. You know, as you're listening right now, I'm sure that you probably have a strong offer, right? And it's very valuable. You know that what you have is going to help a lot of people and that it's going to bring great results to your clients and customers, right? But what I often see on the offer page is that it's presented almost like an inventory list like this. It's kind of like, here's what you get, here's what's included, here's how many calls you have with me, here's the bonus, here's the price, here's the button, right? And when my clients come to me, they wonder why people are landing on the page, but they're not buying. Or they're wondering why they're asking so many questions on the sales call. Or people keep saying, right, that they're interested, but then they don't move forward and actually buy. The issue may be that the page has not connected the information that you're giving them to the buyer's actual decision. So as you listen today, I want you to ask yourself this. I want you to ask, is my page giving the buyer enough information to understand the offer, but not enough reason to act? You know, when a sales page isn't selling the way that someone would have hoped, the first instinct, and I know this has been my first instinct in the past and previous businesses, is usually just to add more. You know, things like add more bullet points, add more proof, add more sections to the page, and sometimes that's needed. I've done a lot of sales page audits, and as I'm looking through the sections, I have a checklist, and almost inevitably, there are very important sections that are missing. But I want you to hear is that more information doesn't automatically make someone trust you more or want the offer more. This is because your buyer isn't only looking for what she gets. She's trying to understand what those things will actually do for her. And this is where a page can feel perfectly clear to you, but still not be persuasive enough to the buyer. You may be assuming that the value is obvious, right? But it isn't. It may not be. You know why those pieces matter. You know why you included them and how they support the result, but your buyer doesn't know that yet. So ask yourself, where am I assuming the buyer understands the value instead of actually showing her why it matters? So today I have 3 points that I want to go through. And that first point is that the buyer doesn't care about the thing until she understands the relief behind it. So let's use a simple example. Okay. Let's say that someone has a fitness business and she's selling a group program. On the sales page, she says the program includes meal plans and recipes and workouts, coaching and support. That all sounds great and it sounds fine. There's nothing wrong with saying those things, but the buyer does need to know what's included, right? So if the page stops there, then the buyer may think, okay, I've had meal plans before. I've downloaded recipes before. I've bought the workouts before. So the page actually has to go a little further. The value of the meal plan is not just what she gets, right? It's not that she just gets a meal plan. The value is also that she has something she can actually follow when her week gets busy. That's the part that the page has to say, because the buyer is not buying just a meal plan. She's actually buying less decision fatigue. She's buying a way to follow through. She's buying that feeling that this might actually fit into her real life. Okay. This is what selling does. It connects the thing to the reason the buyer should care. So I think that's kind of cool. We started this with, okay, a list of deliverables. She's going to get a meal plan. And you think that's what you're selling, right? If you were this fitness professional, but no, she's actually selling less decision fatigue. So do you see the difference in how we're saying those things? This applies to almost every offer, okay? And I saw this with a client of mine, who provides a very high touch service. On paper, it would have been really easy to describe what her clients were paying for just by listing everything she handled for them. She handled the planning, she handled recommendations, the logistics, and the support. But as I listened to her talk about the experience that she was creating for her clients, I realized that those things weren't actually the most compelling part of the offer. What her clients really valued was how little they had to actually think once they hired her. They didn't have to spend hours researching options or comparing information, second guessing their decision. That's a big one, right? Or worrying about all the details that they might be missing. Instead, she carried the mental load for them. And that was the value I wanted the messaging to make visible. The planning and the support were the deliverables, but her client was really buying the relief of not having to manage it themselves. And so that's the distinction I'm asking you to look for in your own offers. What are you giving someone and what are they actually buying because of it? And that's the distinction I'm asking you to look for. So if your page is mostly listing what someone gets, I want you to ask yourself 3 questions here. Have I shown her why this matters? Have I connected the deliverable to the real problem? And have I explained what this helps her avoid, simplify, understand, or finally move through? Because that is often the missing piece. Here's the second point. Your page has to answer the questions the buyer is too polite to ask. So the second thing I want to talk about is what your buyer is wondering while she's reading, because she's usually not just reading passively, she's actually deciding, okay? And some of the most important questions she has may never actually be asked out loud, and she may never even ask them to you, okay? So she may be wondering one of these 6 things. The first is this really different from the other option I'm considering? Second, have you helped someone like me before? Third question she's asking, is this actually worth the investment? And personally, I'm going to just say that I think about this all the time when I'm weighing my options to purchase something, especially something that's very high touch or like a higher investment. Okay. So she's thinking, is this actually worth the investment? Fourth, she's thinking, will I use this? Fifth, she's asking, will this solve the specific problem I have? And lastly, she is asking this, and it's a big one. She's asking, can I trust this person? So if your sales page does not answer those questions, these questions don't disappear in the mind of the buyer. They stay in her mind. And that's especially important with a premium offer because your buyer isn't just looking for some information. She's looking for enough confidence to make a decision. She wants to understand, why is this right for her? Why your approach is different, whether you've helped someone like her before, and whether the investment makes sense. So if the page leaves those questions unanswered, she actually has to fill in the gaps herself. And that's where the hesitation creeps in. That's the doubt that comes in. And that's when someone just leaves a page and most of the time they don't come back. Okay. So ask yourself, is your page answering the questions your buyer may be too polite to ask, maybe too busy to ask, or too unsure to ask out loud? Because if those questions are not answered on the page, they may become the reason that she does not move forward. All right, let's get into our last point. Point 3. If the page doesn't create desire, the sales call has to do too much. So let's talk about what happens when the page does not do this. Because the cost is not only that people don't buy, the cost also shows up later, and that's on the sales call. So this is where the cost of unclear messaging shows up later. When the page hasn't communicated enough value, then you have to make up for it in the conversation that you're having with that person. And so just imagine you're, sitting on a Zoom chat, this person's considering buying your product, program, or offer, your service, and you're now explaining how the offer works. You have to explain to her why it's different. You're trying to connect the dots for the buyer before, she hasn't booked yet, right? So you're connecting the dots that the buyer could have already had started connecting before she booked, but it's not all in place yet, right? And so suddenly, instead of having a conversation with someone who already understands why she's there, you feel like you're trying to convince her. And I hate that feeling. A long time ago in my business, I decided that I was not going to be convincing people. So your page should be doing some of that work before you ever get on the call with that person. I had a client last year tell me something after we worked on her messaging that illustrates this perfectly. So she told me that the people coming through her website to book a call, they were already a yes to her approach before they ever got on the phone with her. That is amazing, right? So think about the difference that makes. She wasn't getting on those calls, having to start from the beginning and convince someone why her approach made sense. The messaging on her website had already done some of that work. So by the time they talked, that conversation was much more about whether they were a good fit for each other. And so that's what I mean when I say your sales page should be doing some of the selling before you ever get on the call. It doesn't have to close every person who lands on the page, but it should help that right person arrive at the conversation already understanding what you do and why it matters and why your approach might be right for them. And so when this is missing, everything starts to feel difficult, and you may start questioning the offer. You're questioning the market, the environment right now we have in business. You're questioning the price, and you're even questioning yourself, when the real issue may be the way that the value is being communicated and not exactly you or your business. It's just the way it's being communicated. So I want you to ask yourself, is your sales page preparing buyers for the next step, or is it making you do more work in your discovery calls? If the page does not create enough desire, trust, and clarity before the call, then you may end up having to do more convincing later. And let's just not be in that situation. Let's try to get this all resolved up front. So by the time you actually talk to the person, if that's something you do with discovery calls, then they really are more about just making sure you're the right match to work together. So if people are landing on your sales page, but they're not taking the next step, don't only ask, did I explain my offer well enough? I want you to ask, did I give them enough reason to act? Because your page, it can be accurate. It can be very clear, and it can even include all the details. It can tell someone exactly what they get, but still fail to make the value of what you're offering obvious. That's a tongue twister. Offering obvious. And that's one of the things I look at inside the message recalibration intensive that I do with my clients. We are looking at, where are you assuming that the buyer sees value that you can see, but you can see it because you're so close to the offer, right? But your buyer doesn't see the value because she's not as close to it as you are. So the question I want to leave you with today is my copy helping the buyer understand the value behind what's included? So if this episode is making you wonder whether your sales page is listing what's included but not really showing the value behind it, I'd love to invite you to book a 30-minute complimentary consultation with me. We can talk about what may be happening on your sales page or offer page or wherever people are supposed to be taking the next step. And we'll look at whether you might need right now a message recalibration, perhaps some newly written copy, or just another strategic next step. Because your offer, it's already strong. You've gotten results from people, right? You even have testimonials from other people who have gone through it. Your clients and customers have seen amazing results, right? But the page just isn't giving new buyers enough reason to act. So you can find a link to book your 30-minute complimentary consultation in the show notes, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for spending time with me today on this episode of 7-Figure Copy. If this conversation helped you see where your messaging or copy may be creating friction, visit whitehousesm.com to book a complimentary copy consultation with me today. And if you found this episode valuable, follow or subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a fellow business owner who may need to hear this conversation too.
This podcast is produced, mixed, and edited by Cardinal Studio. For more information about how to start your own podcast, please visit www.cardinalstudio.co or email Mike at mike@cardinalstudio.co. You can also find the details in the show notes.